Hello, and welcome to the Plastic Showreel, where we talk about things.
Film things. This is a show where we look at the hot topics of film and we dissect the movies that around them, really. My name is Liv.
And I'm Liam, and picture us as a big plastic bag that knows too much about questionable things.
Today's episode, we're talking about reboots and remakes of popular films, unknown films, what constitutes as a good remake, what constitutes a good reboot, why they exist in the first place, do we need them, what constitutes the bad one. There's a lot of bad ones.
We're going to get existential probably, but in addition to that, we're going to have this whole recommendation feature that will be incorporated into the season where I'll recommend a film to Liv, she'll recommend one to me, and at the next episode, we'll talk about them. They'll probably be bad, but I'm looking forward to that anyway. But without further ado, let's just jump into it.
So the obvious starting off point here with remakes is over the past few years, a lot of the reason people kind of bring up remakes as are they pointless, are they not, is a lot. Disney's been remaking a lot of things.
They're probably the biggest culprits for it because of not only in-house, but then you think Pixar and you think Star Wars, and just it almost feels like you're still in like say the 90s or 80s when these films were coming out, but they've actually just got a new skin to
Yeah,
them.
because I mean, specifically with their animated films that they actually own. I mean, at least with Star Wars, they bought Star Wars and then they like rebooted it technically, but they also made a new chapter of it, so that's why a lot of people don't really view that. But their own films, which they do own, are being remade now in live action. Like I say, as of this recording, Beauty and the Beast is the latest one, and I hear Little Mermaid is in production. I hear Lion King is in production as well.
They've had the Jungle Book as well,
They've had the
and
Jungle Book. We've had Cinderella,
Pete's Pete's Dragon,
Peach
is
Dragon,
it?
and
Which I didn't even know that had came out until I went
no,
to the ad stuff in the
Peach Dragon
DVD.
was a thing, which again, which is going to bring me to another point, which we'll probably talk about later, which is again, Disney seems to have an obsession with remaking their most popular films,
Yeah.
and you can see why. Again, money and everything, they want to recreate the magic of the original without actually making something original now. But Disney has a lot of films that Disney kind of went through a dork age after their first few really big films, like where they were making films that weren't making them a lot of money. Like I say, the animators had to really pull through to get a lot of these done. Things like Aristocats, Fox and the Hound, and everything. I mean, a lot of people still like them, but they were kind of at a time where Disney really wasn't making the money for this. And I
Mm,
think maybe those films deserve a second chance as
mm.
opposed to say that something like The Little Mermaid or whatever that you know that was huge anyway. You already kind of made your money off of that. Why don't you try and give these movies that didn't turn out the best way they could have like a second chance almost?
The one that springs to mind when we're talking about Disney is the Black Cauldron, which was a film that I grew up
Yeah.
when I was younger, and
I
not
think
to say it's a bad film, but it's one of those films that you watch I watched it when I was younger, and I found it more scary than anything, and I watched it recently, and I just thought to myself, there's so much going for this film, but I feel like it just I don't know if it was maybe they didn't have the time, or they didn't have the budget, or
I
there
think it
wasn't.
was Disney's lowest point because I think it was Disney's lowest grossing film ever. I think I hope maybe Home in the Range. I don't know, but maybe Home in the Range beats it. But I don't know. I think even back then it was still really didn't make the money it should have.
Cause everyone seems to forget that like Disney did go through periods where like they just like now we think to ourselves they own Marvel and all this are making so much money, don't know what to do with it. But there was this time where like they were relying so much on their creativity, and it seems kind of you wouldn't think that. You'd think that if they have more money, they have more, they have a bigger opportunity to make these new creative original projects. Whereas you think back then when like you're really scrounging for money that you need to stick with your big guns.
Uh huh. Because again, there's things like Fox and the Hound I hear was like particularly bad in terms of for the animators. Like it was really painful for some of them, like Don Bluth.
Mm-hmm.
Famously, I think he left Disney over that because it was just such a hellish project to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when Tim Burton was working for Disney as well.
Oh.
And he, like, apparently went nuts because he couldn't replicate the Disney style the way
Mm-hmm.
drawing the foxes. And it absolutely drove him nuts for a while. It led him to leave Disney for a while until he came back to
Yeah.
do Nightmare Before Christmas. So it's just when you think of all these films that have like a negative even when people like the general audience still like them, when they have such negative experiences attached to them, you
Hmm.
think, why couldn't you just like make something better out of it? I'm
Hmm.
surprised there aren't more remakes of bad films,
Yeah, because
which that's the subject I was kind of building up to. Like I say, the whole point of a remake is to either give a different experience or make something better, as in like give a different experience in the sense of either update the setting, update the technology, or just straight up make it better. So why aren't there more remakes of like films that would actually benefit from it?
yeah, because and again, this is probably the most touchiest of films in the current decade. But Ghostbusters always struck me as that, and not to try and not and I could have an episode on its own, and I'm not gonna. It's such an easy
Do we
target.
really want to get into the
But
Ghostbusters
the thing
discourse?
that I'll dive into just briefly is I wasn't against a Ghostbusters remake, but I think it's more that studios don't really know what they want. They either want
Hmm.
to be this original thing or they want to be a remake. And
Uh-huh.
they, when you go in with this kind of like divided mindset,
Hmm.
you end up with Ghostbusters, a film that it was so good when it was trying to be its own thing, and
Hmm.
the times that it was weakest when it was trying to be like, remember this, or we can do it just as well as them. It's
Hmm.
like it's a different cast of
It's
characters, a
when it's
different.
trying to remind you of the original that it's at its
Uh
worst. It
huh.
should have just been allowed to let breathe. But that's the thing with a lot of these remakes, are not allowed to change a whole lot.
Mm,
Because when I think of a remake, or I think of a reimagining, as I think Tim Burton once coined it, I think of something that is going to give me a different feeling to the original,
mm,
but I don't know if it's a sense of they're scared of the fans of these films or whatever, but they're just really reluctant to put in a lot of these changes. But the result is we're basically getting the same thing
mm.
almost, just with maybe a different setting, maybe the gender's flipped, maybe a different tone or whatever, but it's the same story, same. Because I mean, the Ghostbusters story, it's kind of basically the same as the original.
Yeah.
It's the only difference is again the gender bend casting and really not much else.
Mm,
Which again, I actually would have liked it if they changed more, if they'd made it like. Because apparently they were originally going to be like the daughters of the original actors, which
mm,
that would be changing something, like the idea they have to carry on this legacy, but
mm.
like there's no more ghosts to hunt anymore. But it's make it an actual, because that was back when it was going to be a more direct sequel.
Aye.
But again, like I say, I think the idea was that they had to remake it. But I think a sequel, like with a different cast, probably would have had a better chance.
Aye. It was a shame, but like I said, there's so much about that film that you could dissect. So to
Mhm.
briefly probably move on to
Well, it's with really big films as well. I don't understand why you would make really big iconic films, because unless you do something really different or really unique, nobody is going to look to your version as like I mean, do you remember there was a Ben-Hur remake last year? Because
oh god, yes.
because nobody else remembered.
Isn't that film from like the early
Yeah, that is like one
1900s?
of the biggest films ever, like in terms of scale, size, and everything.
Mm.
People barely even remember there was a remake last year because so few people were interested and so few people went to see it. Because it's like, what is the point of remaking Ben Hur?
Honestly, I think the only reason that I knew about this film was because it came to like the end of 2016 and everyone was listing their worst films. And if your film is only getting recognition because of how
I know.
horrible it is, you're not really doing your job right. And I feel like in this whole age of the internet, because we mentioned briefly about like fans that they're not really that scared. I think back then they probably wouldn't, but
Hmm.
like you've got like Reddit boards dedicated to it on Twitter. Like even if you do something a bit out of step, your whole film could end up like I remember before Spider-Man: Homecoming came out, there was so much controversy coming out about it. About look, I say controversy. There shouldn't have been controversy about
It's basically
race.
just people complaining online.
Yeah, but basically just complaining about races being changed and all that. I'm just like,
I want more changes.
yeah,
So, like I said, this is basically a reboot of Spider Man, and they made it clear they're not doing the origin story, which I was very thankful for.
mhm.
I don't want to see Uncle Ben die
Oh
again.
god, no.
But they made it very clear this is a different Spider Man in a different setting. So, I want things changed.
Oh,
Like I say, I want different things, and it's also a case of it as well. Spidey goes to, like, it's set in modern day. He's like 15, he goes to high school. for the idea that he would be in an all-white high school in New York is completely
Exactly.
implausible. Like, I don't know what planet you're on if you think that's completely plausible. It is New York.
Even like not to spoil anything, but it was shown in the trailer that they go to Washington, and it wasn't even the fact that these characters just like they weren't token black characters, like their
No, they were
ethnicity,
good.
their ethnicity, like it wasn't just oh we're pandering that, like they were so much more than just
Uh-huh.
either the color of their skin or that. I don't know how to pronounce the actress's name, but the one that played Michelle in it, I think
Mhm.
it's Zadriana or something.
Zendaya, I
The
think her name
Zendaya.
is.
I just
I'm
remember.
so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
I remember her from Shake It Up when I was younger, and she was just. I get the whole kind of like Parks and Rec kind of vibe from her. I can't even remember the character's name, but Andy's
Mhm.
girlfriend. That just that kind of like stone cold, but like there's just so
Mhm.
much character to it, and I feel like people just kind of they get scared of change when it comes to remake,
Mhm.
but it needs to be there.
It needs to, otherwise there's no point because I
Mm-hmm.
think again I'm not saying you should change too much to the point where it's
Uh,
unrecognizable. Like I say, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland was very much not in the spirit of the original, mostly because it's not because it didn't follow story or plot elements, it's because it just didn't seem to get the original.
yeah,
Like it's not Narnia, like it's not a war film, it has no logic, so why are you trying to bring a war into it?
and it suffered a
So,
lot.
and that's why it fails, and but that's a case of where the changes actively worsen the film because the changes themselves just make no sense.
It's got Tim Burton syndrome as well. It's just like he relies too much on the same actors, and I don't know. I think that's kind of
Everyone
it's
has to look as pale and weird as
yeah.
possible. Everything has to look kind of creative, but also kind of dark and shadowy. And you're just like, oh, switch it up a bit. Like I say, one,
Yeah.
I always think of the Disney version as like probably my favorite version, not just because, like I say, it's a Disney version, but if I remember, the backgrounds were always black,
Mm-hmm.
but the color was always extremely bright.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the character designs and everything, like Alice herself, that dress
Mm-hmm.
was always extremely bright blue. She was
Mm-hmm.
always like bright blonde against that black background. And that's why that worked so well. It's like the style changes were really good,
Mm-hmm.
but again, when you just change so much of this thing and just don't seem to get what makes the original work, then
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to have a bad time of it. I felt like the Cinderella remake had the same problem as well because like I say, I've said like again the Disney remakes they seem to be kind of beat for beat, shot for shot, but they do. It's not entirely true. They do make a few changes, but the changes they make either don't add much or just even can sometimes maybe make the story a wee bit better, but other times just weaken them. And I think Cinderella stands out the most for that because I remember the one change they made that I did like and I thought improved on the original was having her and the prince meet
Mm-hmm.
before the ball and everything. I thought that was good because that fixes one of the main problems of the story. You
Yeah.
know that they just see each other and that's it. So that fixes that. But then on the other hand, it also has a problem of, for example, when her father dies, she's a grown adult. Like
That's
whereas in in the
valid.
original she was a little girl,
Mm-hmm.
and like when you see her constantly leaving the house and constantly talking with people and everything, isn't the idea that she's meant to be like a prisoner and like the ball is the one night out that she really wants to go to?
Like the whole kind of stuff that the stepsisters and stepmom like it's just kind of like it's like
Uh-huh.
borderline slave. It seems borderline
It pretty
slavery.
much is slavery, and the whole conflict basically rests on that Cinderella really wants to go to the ball because, like, again, she's heard it's amazing and everything, and she wants to just finally leave and do something. But with the remake, you get the sense that she leaves all the time and everything. So why is
Mm-hmm.
the ball even that
There's no
big a
rebellious
thing?
act in it at all, and like there was a whole kind of tension. Like even the character herself in the animated version, she's like, "Oh my god, it's this time. I need to be back home and stuff." And it just feels like
Her
if she's,
friends even encourage her to leave. Like I say,
mm,
they say to her, "Why don't you just leave?" And she comes up with some flimsy, it's my dad's house excuse.
oh,
But there's really no reason for her not to leave. Whereas in the
yeah,
original, like I say, she doesn't leave at all the house. So the indication is she doesn't get that maybe this isn't normal or anything, or she doesn't have any friends to kind of encourage her, save for the talking mice.
but like, and then not to totally be negative, there is the few remakes where you're like, this actually improves tenfold on
Uh-huh,
the
because you have
basis.
to make enough changes while like keeping the spirit of the
Mm-hmm.
original. I think that's basically the key ingredient to doing this. For example, I mean, we both know what we're gonna say.
Yeah.
Mad Max,
Fury
Mad
Road.
Max Fury Road. Probably my favorite action film of all time. But the reason why it works so well is because it is very different. Like I say, different cast, different actors, and
Mhm.
everything. But it still kind of keeps to the spirit of who Mad Max is. He's kind of like this legend
Mhm.
that just goes through other people's stories and everything. Like I say, it's never really established whether it's the same Max from
Mhm.
all the other movies, but it still kind of feels like the spirit of him.
It's a I wouldn't say I'm over exaggerating. I'm saying it's a visual masterpiece.
Oh god, yeah.
It tells so much through so little, and I feel like in this kind of day and age of like exposition being told for like about 10 minutes, and you can the whole reason you're watching a film is not just be told this is this, this is that. Just even a brief glimpse of something, like they don't even have to say stuff, but like, oh, the wasteland, it's so big and it's so empty.
Hmm.
Like just a wee glance how hectic and
We can
dangerous
see
it
it's
is.
because again, there's just kind of this assumption that audiences need every single thing explained to them, and
Mm,
they really don't. Like I say, most of us can kind of see an image or see a character's movements or their expressions and everything and kind of get the general gist,
and,
especially on rewatches
oh
and
no,
things like that.
definitely.
They don't need to just stop the plot dead constantly and just constantly talk about, by the way, this is this, and by the way, I'm feeling this.
And like the one of the biggest changes to it is that in the original Mad Max trilogy, it was Max's stories, or not so much his stories, but his perspective of different stories,
Hmm.
and they kept that element of it. But what they done was to bring in Furiosa,
Uh huh.
um, Charlie's for
Charlize Theron,
yeah,
who is amazing.
amazing. Like I've seen her, I saw her in Monster and that
She's one
before.
of my favorites.
She
She's
is
fantastic.
again just so much is shown from her actions, from her look, from the way that she acts. Like she doesn't like she obviously she talks, but so much is said without opening
The
her
two of
mouth.
them really don't say that much at all. Like I say, it's mostly just like grunts or short
Hmm.
sentences and everything, but you get it, and that's the thing. It's also the thing where if you take an original work and make it something radically different, you probably have a better chance of it standing out. I mean, best example I can think of Little Shop of Horrors,
Hmm.
which was originally like a black and white B movie, just a weird story about, the plants and everything.
Yeah.
And then in the 70s, I think there was it might have been 80s. I can't remember
And
right now,
that,
but
yeah.
it's definitely that era. Someone kind of picked it up and said, "Why don't we make like a kind of campy B movie musical out of this?"
Hmm.
And it worked really damn well.
Hmm.
And like I say, a lot of things. I'm probably just saying it because I'm a huge musical fan, but I think a lot of things work well as musicals. For example, like I say, Prince of Egypt is essentially a remake of Ten
Oh
Commandments.
man.
So, would you ever think like a musical about the story of Moses would work? But it does, and it does really, really well.
Not to go off track, but if they're to remake something, if they were to remake a live action rendition of something, Prince of Egypt, please.
Yes.
It did not get the love. It does, so many of DreamWorks' early work.
Hmm.
Um,
There was
peop
that terrible, terrible movie. What was it, Gods of Egypt or something?
oh
With that bunch
god,
of white actors playing Egyptians and everything, which was kind of the story of Moses, but again, it was just so bad. And it wasn't really a remake of anything, it was just the story of Moses again, told with
mm,
a really bad whitewashed cast and really awful
I, I,
looking.
I think what made that even worse was the director trying to, like, it wouldn't be so much if he apologized and that, but he was just such a arse about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like when it comes to these remakes, like we've talked a lot about how the story has such an impact on it,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like getting the right director
Yeah.
for it as well, because also we touched on Alice in Wonderland, and I could maybe see why it made sense to, oh, it's this big beautiful land full of weird things and that.
Let's
That
get Tim
sounds
Burton.
that sounds like Tim Burton's cup of tea, but obviously like it's not just
I
a,
think someone like Henry Selick could have done it
mm-hmm,
really well. Like I say, he's often associated with Tim Burton because, like, he was the actual director of Nightmare Before Christmas. It wasn't
I,
Tim Burton technically created it, but Henry Selick was the director. But he seems to have a whole lot of like a visual eye than Tim Burton,
mm-hmm,
because Tim Burton's often kind of associated with the visuals, but considering the way his movies have been going and people's perception to them, like people, it's getting old. Like a lot of people are feeling like he's just kind of doing the same thing over and over. Whereas Henry Selick, again, he's done like Coraline, he's done all these other kind of strange
Mhm.
visual movies, which you could argue all have a similar tone, but they all look unique.
I
Like, you wouldn't ever confuse Coraline with Nightmare Before Christmas.
I genuinely thought that Coraline had some sort of like for a brief wee while I thought it was a Tim Burton like
Uh-huh, yeah,
directed film.
it does drive me nuts that some people think
Uh
that, but it's just a shame. Like I say, Selig really isn't given enough credit
oh yeah,
for what he's created, because again, I think Nightmare was just as much his project as it was Tim Burton's. Like I say, Tim Burton, and Danny Elfman, they were like the three main creative
hmm
voices, and it sometimes feels like Tim Burton's the only one that actually gets the recognition for it,
he's
which
not
is a
really
shame.
he's not really done anything decent since Demon Barber of Fleet Street, is
Even
it?
then, I thought that was
And
pretty contagious. But I'm just saying that as someone who's a big fan of the original musical. I just don't like some of the changes. But
yeah,
I do know a lot of people liked it, and it was generally considered pretty good.
I think even before then I can't really think of what he's done. I think there was some film with Ewan McGregor and he done Big Fish or something like that,
Hmm.
which got an alright reception. But as far as I'm concerned, the director.
He was in his heyday, like I say, 80s and 90s. He
Mhm,
was really kind of at his creative peak because, again, he was good at original work, but
mhm.
see, when he started trying to remake things, see, with Planet of the Apes and
Oh,
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, again, taking it back to remakes. Tim
oh,
Burton does not do remakes well. I think we've
oh,
established this because, oh god, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
oh my God!
I
That
mean,
that
I was young when that came out, and even I knew, like, this is just kind of stupid.
like I feel like we're still going through this whole thing where everyone keeps trying to make Johnny Depp a thing,
Hmm.
and again
He
he's
was a thing for a good long while, but he's not like a thing anymore, and a lot of people act like he still is like one
mm,
of the biggest draws. But I mean, the latest Pirates movie completely bombed, and like I say, we all know that's his big franchise and everything. So his name clearly isn't enough to sell
aye,
tickets anymore like it once was. But some people still, like, again, like Tim. Well, I don't know if Burton's really going to cast him in anything anymore. Like I say, after his divorce with Helena Bonham
oh
Carter,
bye,
like I say, it was him and Helena Bonham Carter that were mainly casting. So obviously, I don't think he'll be casting her in things anymore. So I don't know if
aye,
he's going to be casting Johnny Depp anymore. But he was kind of known as that for a while. Like I say, Tim
mm,
Burton's kind of pet project where he
aye.
constantly would shoehorn him into roles that so obviously weren't meant for him.
Yeah, I thought I'd like with the chemistry they usually have on screen. I thought Johnny Depp and
I
Helena
know.
Bonham Carter were the ones that were married. But yeah, the director has such a again. It's the stories, the director, um, and when it comes to remakes, there just doesn't seem to be any effort put into these two, bar from what the initial
Hmm.
director done. But there is the off chance that you'll get something good, like what we said about Mad Max Fury Road. Horror seems to be one of those kind of genres that's so hit and miss
It
with it.
really does with the remakes because I mean some of them it really depends on the original because see if the original wasn't really that good to begin with, they have a higher chance of being better.
Hmm
Because again, even back in the original days of horror or something, like I say, the 80s and 90s with the slasher films and everything, they were still very hit and miss.
hmm
Like I say, with God knows how many Friday the 13th movies,
Oh my,
some of them are like the originals though, some of them are considered good and some of them are considered terrible.
I
Same with the Elm Street movies and
what?
everything. Like I say, a lot of people say the first few are really good, but it trails off. Or some people even think like Friday the 13th part 6 or 7, like some people think those are the best ones and
Yeah,
some people think the first one wasn't really. So it really just depends on what you're remaking and what you can make better and something that really, and again it goes back to what we're saying, remaking movies that probably should have had more time to develop to them to make them better.
because they tend to always go for the horror films that have already been done to death.
Hmm.
Whereas the best horror films that have been remade that personally are some of the best films I've ever seen are like The Fly. These
Hmm.
kind of like The Fly, The Thing, these standalone movies that like they're not trying to build a franchise on them. The
Uh-huh.
Thing I genuinely think is one of the scariest films and one of the most tense films, especially just the ending of it. I feel like these are the kind of remakes you want. You want to be able to tell the story a bit, even if it's not totally differently. You've got especially with The Fly, all these
Hmm.
the effects and that. Like I still feel nauseous when I see certain scenes with Jeff
Yeah,
Goldblum,
uh-huh.
especially because it's Jeff Goldblum. I don't want to see anything happening to
just
him,
because
but
just because it's Jeff Goldblum.
but it's just now that you've got the technology in that, I think that's probably what the Jungle Book done quite well.
Hmm.
Is it?
Jungle Book was one of those ones I actually quite liked because it did actually change a whole lot. It took like it wasn't a remake of the Disney version. It wasn't an adaptation of the book either, but it took more elements from the book than Disney's original version did, which is why I kind of liked it a wee bit more. Going back to though what we said about, big actors being a draw, about how like a lot of these films recently, like the latest Pirates film, thinking that Johnny Depp is like a draw now and he's really not. That really just seems to be a really bad habit as well with remakes. They think because they stick a popular actor or a popular actress in there that it's automatically, people are gonna automatically say it's bigger than the original. I'm gonna open that big can of worms
Oh
right now,
no, oh no.
that remake that we're all talking about, Ghost in the Shell. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Oh
like I
god.
say, everyone was talking about it, good reasons, bad reasons, but
There was good reasons.
some people were kind of
I
excited
think it's
for
because it
it.
was talking like, oh, we're gonna get this like I guess a manga is gonna get a live
It was kind of
adaptation.
one
Yeah.
of the first, or not the first, but it was the first one in a while, like an anime Hollywood adaptation with a lot of money behind
Yeah,
it.
that's true.
So
That's true.
some people were excited for that, but many people were just, I mean, I'm not even going to get into the whole whitewashing argument because
Our topic
that
for
could be its own episode. It probably will be its own
yeah.
episode. Look out for that in
No
season
spoilers for
2.
you.
Look out for that in season 2. But a lot of people agreed that, like, whitewashing aside, the only reason that Scarlett Johansson was cast was because of her name,
Oh yeah.
like Scarlett Johansson, and it bombed. Like I say, that it really didn't make as much money as anyone thought it would, and I kind of got that vibe even just from the trailer
Oh yeah.
because as someone who's seen the original movie and likes it a lot, it was just one of those things where I saw the trailer and I thought to myself, this doesn't seem like it's going to work because it looked like Blade Runner,
Mm,
and I thought we were past every sci-fi movie trying
yeah.
to look like Blade Runner, but apparently not. We're still stuck in that phase because after Blade Runner came out, every single sci-fi
Mm,
movie was trying to look like it with the futuristic city, the neon lights, the big holograms, and everything. We would all kind of try to do this, and then you stick Scarlett Johansson in there again, like I say, blending into the background of Neo Tokyo about as well as
yeah.
anything. Like, okay, yeah, you'd think her name was Makoto Kusanagi,
Oh,
totally,
God.
but
I'm surprised that you could remember that whole name
yeah,
there. That's impressive.
I'm an old school anime fan.
Oh,
I remember these details,
impressive.
but yeah, I could just tell that this just was not the right tone for this. But you could just tell the studio was just like, well, we've cast Scarlett Johansson, and that is all that we need to make money in this. And obviously, it showed. I think it's a good thing as well, then, because it showed that clearly, yeah, it's not. Like, you do need to put more effort into this. You
Mm,
do have to either make it more faithful or make it more its own thing with the spirit of the original.
yeah.
Like, you can, because it's kind of trying to follow the original, but at the same time kind of trying to be its own thing, and it just ends up being neither. Like, it's not its own thing, and it's not a good adaptation of the original, so you're just kind of stuck with this sad bit of nothing.
Mm,
Like, I couldn't even, like, whitewashing controversy aside, I couldn't even find that much to be mad at in it. It was just such a nothing kind of film. There was nothing to be impressed by, but there was nothing to be, again, save for the horrible twist concerning the whitewashing, there was nothing to be
mm,
horrified by. It just is what it was, and I think the studio saw that and they were just like, okay, this was a really bad move on our part, and like I say, it was a damage to Scarlett Johansson as well. Like I say, I don't dislike Scarlett Johansson at all. I think she's can be very good in good projects, but this was purely a case of just saying, let's just cast a name that's going to make money.
mm.
But you need more than that. You need a whole lot of different aspects and to combine to make a full remake of a different product from a different country.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we're kind of living in that age of just like, maybe not so much inoffensive, but just meh movies that you walk in, you walk out like,
that
I don't.
that that gave me nothing.
Yeah, like I.
But it's also in the sense that American, this is more a case with horror films than anything else, but Americans feel like they need to remake every foreign film that they
Oh,
see. Like, every foreign horror film has received an American remake at some point, and most of them are just generally agreed as either meh or
I
bad.
want to quickly like, Old Boy, the original, was amazing. It's one of my favorite films of all time. There's a scene with the hallway, and every American film since then has tried to recreate that. But then they made an American remake, and it made me want to maybe so much cry, but just kind of wince at how. Why couldn't you just like distribute the movie over there? Try and the director had this vision, and by trying to just like Americanize it, like we get that
Hmm.
a lot in Scotland. Everything gets Americanized, but when it comes to film, it seems just so much more irritating. It shouldn't really. I don't think in this day and age, maybe back then, back in the 80s or 90s, when like you didn't have like the options of like, oh, I can
Finding
find
the original.
finding the
We
original.
have the internet now. Like the
Mm-hmm.
originals are very easy to find, and like I say, wide releases and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of seems like a sad attempt of film filmmakers and directors and everything just assuming that because it's in another language and it's from in a different country that like a wide general audience, like the American broad general audience, won't want to see it. It's like, oh, why would we make them read subtitles and everything? And it's like they really don't give audiences enough credit, because if they are interested enough in a film, they will go see it regardless of whether they have to read subtitles or not.
Have you seen how many weeaboos we've got? Like
Yeah,
folk watch subbed anime all the time.
like I say, anime and everything. Like I say, it's a reason it's as popular as it is. And like I
Mm-hmm.
say, dubbed anime like is a huge market, and it's a very good market. It gives
Mm-hmm.
some great voice actors time to shine. But majority of people who are interested in a show will watch it whether it is dubbed or not.
No,
Like if they are interested enough, they will find the sub version. And it's the same with movies. Like I say, if people see a trailer or people see a preview and they think to themselves that looks interesting, and they see it's in Spanish or
mm-hmm.
Norwegian or whatever, they're just gonna go, yeah, okay, I'll see it anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. It just seems like we've talked director, we've talked story, and it just seems like the final element is just poor choices. The choice of getting somebody like Scarlett Johansson in a role that's just she doesn't suit. She doesn't need to be in. Like it could have been a total chance for like an Asian actress to
Uh
play
huh.
that role, because as far as I'm concerned, like I probably wouldn't have went to see the film anyway, so I can't really speak. But I feel like folk who are fans of the original material would have been like, oh, they're sticking to it, or oh, this is given somebody who has shares the heritage of this really prolific
Mhm.
manga character the time to shine. Because when you think about it, like I can only count a few notable like Hollywood A-listers
Mhm.
who are Asian, and
Yeah.
usually Jack Chan's usually the only one that folk really know, and
Uh
it
huh.
feels like
But there's still a lot of really talented like Asian American
mm,
actresses who could have played. You don't even
mm,
necessarily need a native Asian actress
mm-hmm.
or anything, like I say, Asian American, because again, if we ever do a whitewashing episode, it'll probably be in season two, and we'll go more into this. But people always, I remember when I was seeing all the arguments and debates about this, and the people who were defending it like had either two arguments. One was she's a cyborg, so it doesn't matter what she looks like, which
Mm-hmm.
is problematic for quite a few reasons, which I'll
But
probably go into later. It's like, so who cares if she looks
yeah,
Caucasian, she's a cyborg, which again, the movie itself completely undoes that with the horrible twist about who she really is. But the
right.
second one was there was this video that a lot of people pointed to where they approached a lot of Japanese people in the street and showed them the photo of Scarlett
Mm-hmm.
Johansson as a character and asked them, what do you think of that? And the majority of them weren't bothered. They were
Mm-hmm.
said, like, I don't really care. And a lot of people point to that as a defense, saying, like, look, the Japanese clearly don't care. And it says, yes, that's because they live in their native Japan. The
Mm-hmm.
majority of the people who had a problem with the casting were Asian Americans,
Yeah.
because this is an American remake,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes without saying that the casting should reflect that, because America is extremely diverse. Because a lot
Oh,
of like Eastern countries and everything are nowhere near as like, obviously there's plenty of people of different races and different backgrounds and stuff, but it is nowhere near as diverse as America.
mm-hmm.
So in the native country, they probably wouldn't see it as such a big deal that like a white American actress would be playing the part,
Their
because
their policy is kind of the representation that we are trying to do. Like, oh, we're
they,
gonna have a white actress, but like you're saying about the Asian Americans, they're probably like, we've got this actual chance to be in a film, and we're
uh-huh. So, and then, like I say, the majority of people, like, again, it's mostly white people, I always notice, point to that video and say, like, look, like, you're speaking for a group that you don't represent. So it's like, why the Japanese clearly don't care, why should you? And it's like, well, no, because the majority of people who had the problem were Asian Americans.
hmm And they asked a few
And it's
folk
like,
as well.
do their opinions suddenly not count simply because they're not natively from Japan?
It's like people who try and like use the argument like, oh, I can say this word because I've got a black friend. They say it's all right. Like I remember seeing that same video. It was about 10 people. I think they asked that question to. If you ask 10 people of any group, you could try and justify any argument.
Yeah, you could just find as well, like I say, it plays into biased journalism all the time as well.
hmm
You just find 10 people who agree with you
Oh.
and then interview all of them and then say, look, my argument is completely faultless because I have 10 people here to back me up, even though maybe you interviewed 20 people and the other 10 disagreed with you, but
hmm
you chose not to show that.
Totally
Like,
agree.
again, we don't know.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a tangent I went off on. Then we'll probably dive a lot more into this if we ever do an episode on whitewashing.
Six
So
seasons in the movie. 6 seasons in the movie. But the whole thing about poor choices like takes me on to the worst one of the worst films, maybe the
oh
worst one of
god,
2015.
oh no, is it
Fantastic Four, Fan Four Stick.
Fan
I'm
Four
gonna go with
Stick?
Fan
Oh
Four Stick.
no, not Fan Four Stick. Why do we need to talk about Fan Four Stick?
Like I know we have like bad superhero films, like folks say Suicide Squad. Like I say Suicide Squad.
Yeah, Suicide Squad. Yeah. Like, I mean, people rag on DC, not so much now because Wonder Woman and Lego Batman and everything, but Fan Four Stick was just kind of it was like a demonstration of just how bad can we go.
Like Marvel and DC fans like MCU fans and DCU fans went, you know what? We can agree. This was absolutely
And then
horrible.
Sony just comes in and it's like, oh god, please no.
They were probably happy. They were probably like, oh god, everyone's forgot about Amazing Spider-Man 2 then because fantastic.
I mean, say what you want about DC and like I say Marvel's lesser films and so, but like Sony just comes in and is like, we can do this because they only made it, like, again, this is maybe a cynical interpretation, but it's very factually backed, I think. Their license for the rights was basically about to expire, and they just really wanted to make this just so they can hold on to the rights of the Fantastic Four. So it feels that way. It just feels like something that was just rushed out to kind of justify holding on to the rights. And I feel sorry for the director who made this, because I remember he sent out a tweet even saying, like, about what was it, 2 years ago or so, a year ago or so, like, I had a great version of this and you guys will probably never see that.
I think it was actually Fox done it, but Sony are also as bad, like I say, with the Spider-Man film.
Oh, was it Fox?
It was Fox.
Oh, I'm sorry, right.
But Fox, you wouldn't expect it from Fox because they've made, again, some of the best films. But I feel like, especially with the superhero films, I think we've got an episode in mind that will cover this a bit more when it comes to extended universes and whatnot. So I don't want to dabble in too much of that. But with the choices, it seems so much that it's not even directors that get the choices. It's that they're told this, and if yours isn't good enough, don't worry, we'll just get another team to edit it and come out with just...
Like I say, people forget how many films are basically just made in the editing room. Like I say, you can do the shots and everything. Even some actors don't even know what their characters are doing or what they're meant to be, what context it is, until they see it themselves on the screen.
Yeah, speaking as journalists, like, the editing is like, you go out and you film something and it'd be like, oh god, this just not look good at all. Or you might think, oh, this looks great, and you hand it to the editing team and they can make something that you're like, to be like, okay, I put that, and then sometimes you end up with Fantastic Four.
You end up with Fan Four Stick,
which is such a shame because I
feel like, honestly, this Fan Four Stick has so many, like, so much behind the scenes problems. I honestly think a documentary about that would be more interesting than the movie that we actually got.
Something akin to like The Room or something, like just like, kind of behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes thing. Like I say, I actually feel like that would be far more interesting. Like, just what went wrong here, because, like I say, I feel like this director really had good intentions with trying to make a good Fantastic Four movie. Because we remember kind of the early 2000s ones, like I say, they weren't god-awful, but they were pretty bad. And the really old version and everything. So I feel like whoever... Again, his name escapes me and I'm sorry, but I feel like whoever this guy was, he really kind of wanted to make a good film with this, but it was just... so much crap thrown at the wall, so much things changed about, it was just so long, so dreary, and it just makes you think how many people just kind of get screwed over in this, because I don't know, like I say, the 4 kids, the 4 teenagers or whatever, like, I don't know, I'm not going to judge them via this movie because I don't think it's worth it. Like, I don't know if they're talented, they probably are.
They all, like, Miles Teller had Whiplash behind him, Kate Mara from House of Cards, and Michael B. Jordan, to, thankfully, I think it was either the end of that year or the year after, had Creed, who I was hoping for him to get Oscar nomination. I think that was one of the big controversies.
Fan Four Stick genuinely feels like one of those movies where you can't rag on any of the actors because no one could have made this work. Like, it's kind of like the Twilight films or the Star Wars prequels.
Oh god, yeah.
Like, because I always feel bad. I still feel bad for her, like I say, Kristen Stewart, and whatever your opinion of her, so many people's opinions of her were coloured by the Twilight films, but I just feel like nobody was good in
Oh
Twilight.
no.
Nobody could make this material work, so I don't understand why she got so much flack for it. Because, like I say, Taylor Luther and
Oh, Taylor Lautner,
Taylor
yeah.
Lautner
Don't
and
ask me why I still know his name.
Robert Patterson and everything, like I say, they were working with just as terrible material and they were just as bad, but for some reason they got off scot-free, whereas Christian Stewart took the brunt of it. And it's the same with Hayden Christensen with the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
He just got it all lumped on him, even though nobody's good in that. Save for maybe Palpatine, but that's
Oh,
just
God.
because he's the only good part of it, mostly because he's just having fun. But the rest of them, like I say, yeah, I suppose Natalie Portman got some flack for it as well, but not
Yeah.
as much as Hayden Christensen
Why?
did. And I was
You
so
make-
sorry for that poor kid that played him in the first prequel, Jake Lloyd.
Oh god, yeah,
Because from what I hear, his life was like destroyed.
he went
by
to like
this.
all these like different like Star Wars cons, and apparently he just made them miserable.
And like all these grown, like, I mean, I understand like a franchise or a fandom can mean a lot to somebody, but see when you're a grown ass man and you're telling a literal child you've ruined everything for me,
Yeah.
like, dude, like that's
Shouldn't-
really not cool.
Shouldn't you be blaming like the
Shouldn't you be
50-plus-year-old
blaming-
man who
like-
was the director of all this, who didn't even look at the script more than
And
once
it's
and
again,
thought,
like I say, we're going back to saying movies are made in the editing room. Do you want to know the reason why the first three, as in chronologically 4, 5, and 6, the Star Wars films are considered much better than the prequels?
because George Lucas had like the like he-
George Lucas divorced his editor. She basically made this film work. Apparently, the first cut of A New Hope was a complete mess before she
Oh
got
yeah, that
to
whole
it.
film was a complete mess. Like it's a miracle that Star Wars is actually a thing.
No, Star Wars is like a landmark in so many ways, but apparently the very first shoot of A New Hope, like the first cut, was a complete mess before she got to it, and we could have ended up with, again, like I say, Phantom Menace, which is again what A New Hope could have been if it was
Yeah.
just George Lucas at the helm. So I just feel so sad for all the people that were just dragged into this and couldn't find any way out of it.
So we talk about these reasons about why specifically these films are bad, like directors, stories, creative choice, and that. But I feel like the big thing we need to address before we finish is why we keep seeing these remakes and reboots keep popping up time and time
Why
again.
they're so popular
Why
now.
they're so popular, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, a lot of people like to point to, oh, Hollywood's out of ideas, and yeah, they are. They have been for ages. Hollywood's been out of ideas for ages. But I don't think it's necessarily all down to that. I think a lot of it is down to not so much Hollywood's out of ideas, but Hollywood does not want to take risks at all, because I know everyone makes the jokes Hollywood's only concern is making money, and it is our main concern, but because again, with the economy being as it is now, they want something that's going to guarantee a profit.
Yeah.
So they basically profit off, again, either an already existing franchise, an already existing popular movie, because with the invention of the internet, and so nostalgia is bigger than it's ever been. Because you can just go online, you can find something, a movie from your childhood. You don't have to go to the video store to rent it anymore. You don't have to find it on DVD or anything. You can very easily find it. So there's this idea that people are really retreating back to nostalgia, especially with like the current political climate and everything. Like I say, a lot of people want to feel like they're back in that time. So that's kind of being taken advantage of, in the sense that we're going to take the thing that you hold a lot very close to you and make it a modern set. And that's why I think people respond so negatively to them as well, because the reason why a lot of these movies are so beloved is because they take them back to that time. They take them back to like when they were a kid watching it. They don't want to be an adult watching a new version of it. They want to be a kid watching the version they grew up with.
Michael Bay killed my childhood.
Yeah,
Something that
Michael
was
Bay killed my
something-
childhood.
Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They brought back Power Rangers this year, and I didn't go see it because I totally forgot that it happened.
I wasn't too thingied about the Power Ranger. I actually did see it, and I actually quite liked it a fair bit, because the updates I think they made were quite good actually. Like I say, they introduced more diversity with the Rangers and so on. So I didn't think it was too bad at all actually. But I get what you mean with the nostalgic franchises, and it's not just the franchises; it's specific movies as well. I mean, Jurassic World, like I say, they
Oh
want
god.
so bad to recreate the feelings you had when you watched Jurassic Park, but you're never going to have those same feelings
Even
unless.
sequels couldn't do that.
Uh-huh,
Like the first one's just it's a classic for a reason.
like you're never going to have that same feeling that you had when you watched Jurassic Park for the
Mhm.
first time unless you're watching Jurassic Park.
Mhm. And Jumanji, like what I mentioned it earlier on, but I feel like that's probably a classic example of that. I remember watching that. I remember being terrified of watching that.
I know that was pretty freaky.
The scene with the plant. I think there's a plant that pops up, and there's just like this big kind of. It is obviously that it resembles something that I don't want to say in the podcast, but even at a young age, I'm like, no, please, no. But it's such an adventure. Like I actually watched it this week just so I could get myself into the mindset for this episode, and I watched it in the trailer. Watched it right after, and I'm like, the cast. I've not even got a problem with Jack Black. I think they're trying to build up on nostalgia from actors in this film, like
hmm
Jack Black. The Rock's obviously a big thing now, but you think The Rock, you think wrestling, you
hmm
think all these cheesy films he's done before.
hmm
Um, and it just feels like they're I'm optimistic. I want to be
hmm
optimistic. I never go into a film wanting it to be bad, but for
I do.
me, but well,
I do.
well, to be fair, I'd rather a film was either bad or great. I'd rather that it wasn't
Yeah,
meh.
I think the worst kind of films are the meh films because there's just really not that much to say. It's like that
Mm.
didn't take anything away from me, that didn't give me
Yeah,
anything.
at least if it's bad, I've got the anger to
Uh-huh.
write with.
At least if it's bad, there's something it connected with you on some level, even if it was just to either annoy or offend you or whatever.
Yeah, but with Jumanji, like the whole reason I think I'm a bit optimistic is when it came to the one before, it was also like Jumanji taking place in the real world, whereas it's like them exploring that. So I'm hoping and praying that it'll be good. But I feel like we've mentioned repeatedly is that why why are we still going on about this same franchise that we've not even like talked about for about it came out in the 90s, so like at least I think it was the 90s,
But it's
two
also like the
decades.
safety of it as well
Mhm.
because, like I say, critics are different from moviegoers. Critics have to see all the
Oh
movies,
yeah.
but the general public will generally, like I say, unless there's someone, again, unless they're like us and they just go see as many movies, like whether they think they'll be good or bad,
Mhm.
most general people want to go into a movie thinking that they'll like it. So they're less willing to take a chance on something that they think they might not like. Like if they see a completely original movie trailer and they don't really know, like I say, they're not sure whether it's their thing or whether they'll like it or not, they're probably not going to go see it. They're probably going to wait till it's like just been distributed or something.
Or
Whereas
Netflix,
if
yeah.
it connects to something they're familiar with, they kind of feel like even if they don't think it'll be as good as the original, they feel like they're kind of in good hands. Like, for example, what was it again? Again, like there are exceptions, like I say, Ben Hur and everything, but then there's
Mhm.
things like again Jurassic World and stuff like that made a lot of money. It's kind of like okay, I don't think it's going to be as good as Jurassic Park, but at the same time, it's still the same feel. It's still the same dinosaurs and everything. So chances are I'm going to come out of it reasonably happy.
Yeah, I feel like again connecting to your point there is the fact that nowadays people are still going to the cinema. Obviously, there's this whole thing about like oh cinema's dying because of like people downloading films and that. But the reality is that most people will go to the cinema. The average person will go to cinema at least 4 or 5, at most 5 times a year. So say you think to yourself, right, I'm going to go to the cinema 5 times this year. If you're like a Marvel fan or something like that, that's probably at least 3 of them taken
Uh
away. So
huh.
you've got 2 more times to go to the cinema. You would probably want one of them to be something that you're familiar with because
Mhm.
humans we're drawn to things that we know. The thought of seeing something that we're not sure about, knowing whether or not we're going to be wasting our money, especially like you said in the economy, you want to make sure that your money's going towards something that you actually want to see, which I think probably plays a part into why these remakes are happening so
Mhm.
much because the
Because there's a sense that if you didn't like the film, you kind of feel like again you've wasted your money
hmm
as well. And like I say, nobody likes doing that.
oh no definitely
So
not.
there's again, unless you're people like us and you just go and see as many movies, regardless of whether they're good or bad, just for the sake of having an opinion, then chances are if you're going to spend money on a cinema ticket, you want it to be something that you have a pretty sure idea that you're going to like, or it's going to have elements in it that you're going to
hmm
like.
I can understand where big companies like this are coming from when it comes to like making original films as opposed to remakes, because when it came to Tomorrowland, for instance, it's one like the few like original like IPs per se.
And it didn't do very
It did.
well.
I think it made back its budget in the box office, but nowadays your budget is times two because of your
Mm.
advertising and that.
Because I remember seeing a few trailers for it, but again, not as much nearly as Disney loves to put into their advertising. Because
Yeah.
again, when Beauty and the Beast was being remade, it was everywhere.
Mhm.
Again, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing a trailer or an advertisement for it because they knew this connected with
Mhm.
something. They knew that people were going to see this and think, oh, look, it's that thing I recognize. Whereas Tomorrowland, like I say, it was a risk taken on an original project. So it's like there's less of a drive to really aggressively promote it
Mhm.
because they just don't know if it's going to connect with people or not. And the chances are, if they see the trailer and they think that intrigues them, that's all they're going to need. They don't need the constant advertisements.
No, totally, totally. And when it came to this film, it kind of seemed to like be ticking all the right boxes. From what I've heard about the film, the story was solid and imaginative, which is something like you never really seem to say in a sense when you're talking about a recent
I
film.
know.
Uh, George Clooney as like the star of the thing, it wasn't like a case of, oh, we need a big actor. Like,
Because even George Clooney, I think, was really downplayed in this. I
mm-hmm.
think Hugh Laurie was in it as well. Those are
Aye,
two big actors, but again, there wasn't a sense of like the name is all that's there.
mm-hmm.
But ironically, even though that's a good thing, that worked against it as well because it just did not have any big money draw for it.
Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to it, is it's not Hollywood scared of making original stuff. It's just they're scared of taking risks, and the only times that you can think of them taking risks and benefiting from it is maybe when it comes to, and it makes sense when
In
you
a
think
in
of
a in
MCU.
a pre-existing franchise,
Exactly,
like I say, like MCU or Star Wars, for that is one of the good things. Like I say, I feel like we've been bragging on a lot, but there is one good aspect to this whole remake culture, and that is introducing new
mm-hmm.
actors. Because again, I'm going to use Star Wars as a big example because even though it's technically a continuation, it's basically a reboot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was these three main actors, like I say, Ray, Finn, and like Poe,
Yep,
Oscar
yep,
Isaac, John Boyega,
yeah,
and
and
Daisy Ridley and
yeah.
everything. Nobody, I think John Boyega, I'm very sorry if I'm mispronouncing
No,
that,
no,
had been
that's
in, I think, was it Attack of the Block?
great film.
Which
Yeah,
was a good
that's
film, but it wasn't like a huge bit. It's kind of a cult classic, but
It's a British cult classic,
it's a
but
British
again,
cult
it's
classic,
not
but it's
one that
not.
people
And
knew.
the other two, like I say, Oscar Isaac's been in some bit parts, but Daisy Ridley,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's.
I think it was one of our first roles, as far as I
And
know.
this kind of introduced the world to them, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a good thing because the thing with Star Wars and something as big as Star Wars is it is always going to make
Oh
money.
yeah.
It was going to make money no matter who you put in there. And that was kind of the advantage of it. Like I say, we could, even though we obviously had the old cast back for like the nostalgia factor and stuff,
Yeah.
we still didn't completely rely on them. Like I say, Harrison Ford, Princess Leia, and everything, like they have their parts and everything. Princess Leia, I say, Carrie Fisher. I
Ah.
can't think of it as anything but Princess Leia. I'm sorry, but Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford, like I say, they're in it, and it's good to see them. But the main focus is still on our main leads,
Mhm.
and that's where the good stuff is. And like I say, Mark Hamill only appears at the end.
Yeah.
So that is kind of one of the good things. Like I say, if it's a very successful franchise like Star Wars or Marvel or whatever, you can use it as an opportunity to introduce a lot of new actors. Like I say, Tom Holland recently as
Mhm.
Spider-Man, he was kind of an unknown. He was mainly in theatre, I think, before this.
Yeah.
And like I say, he's widely regarded as one of the best things about the whole
Oh,
film.
yeah, definitely. I think that the whole thing we want people to go away thinking is that we're not like. I think there's this whole culture that like remake bad, reboot bad. That we kind of wanted to know more about why they happened, and I think we've explored that quite well. Like
Oh yeah.
why these films end up bad. That it's not all negative things. I think that what we need to do is that when it comes to seeing these films, to not kind of go blindly in. This like I think a lot of film critics nowadays are kind of like that.
Mhm.
They'll see a film and they'll be like, "Oh, I remember this happened when I was younger," and they had that. Like Star Wars again, not to rag on it,
Uh huh.
but somebody sees R2D2 and they think, "Oh my god, best film ever." It
Mhm.
happened with Rogue One a lot. I think Rogue One got a lot of great reviews, but and even though it might not necessarily be a remake, it's more of a
It's a side story, but it's attached to a very profitable
uh-huh,
franchise.
that we kind of need to. We kind of need to stop these remakes and reboots happening. Not so much stop them happening, stop them being bad. Is that you need to show Hollywood that it's not what you're wanting. If you want to show them that we want a change, it comes to independent movies, and it's good to see that a lot of independent directors.
That's where a lot of like the strange and original ideas come from. It is mainly like the kind of art house and indie
Hmm.
scene, and it kind of always has. Like I say, Hollywood doesn't generally go for the too weird and the too
Hmm.
surreal. Like, again, save for occasional projects, like I say, David Lynch has pretty
Oh,
much
aye,
built his whole career off of that. But again, he's kind of the exception. But it's kind of a case of where Hollywood is kind of shying away from,
mm.
but also kind of keeps coming back to this idea of like we'll remake something you like, but we won't change it too much.
Yeah,
Like so you're not uncomfortable, but I think that's alienating more people than it
yeah.
is drawing them in, because the idea is that either you want to change the original in some way, as in setting change or change a character's perspective or something, or you want to improve on it, as in update it, make it better, or set it in the present day because there is something in the present day that would bring something else to this film.
Hmm.
Like I say, obviously the world has changed a lot in the last few decades, so
Yeah,
an update of, say, a 70s film, like if you focus on some different aspects of it, could bring a different dimension into it.
yeah. And I feel like this ties in perfectly to our final segment where we're gonna recommend one another a film that, well, they're both remakes.
We're both, well, considering the theme of this episode, we are both
Mm.
going to recommend each other a remake.
And I feel like I'll hit out with my recommendation first, and it'll be Carrie.
Right,
The
so I need to watch the remake of Carrie. Wonderful. Like I say, I've seen the original, so I'll see the remake and see what I have to say. Um, Liam, I am going to ask you to rewatch. It's a remake of a 1933, I think, German film, Victor Victoria.
I'm already so confused as to
No, it is one of my. It's kind of an excuse to talk about Victor Victoria because I really do love it, but it is still technically a
Mm.
remake. And again, it's one of those remakes that improves a lot on the original and changes a lot of the things surrounding it. It kind of reminds me of
I'll
Little
see.
Shop of Horrors in that it kind of was a black and white movie that wasn't distributed very widely, and then it was just made into something a bit more accessible and bombastic. So,
So you gave me a good movie, then I feel a bit bad
oh,
now.
oh, you're telling me the remake of Carrie isn't good? I couldn't have expected anything else.
But yeah, that's been our first episode there. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to contact us to let us know any criticism you have about this episode, or if you just want to let us know any of your thoughts, positive or negative, you can contact us on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, which is Plastic Showreel on all three accounts. This has been Plastic Showreel. I've been Liam.
I have been Liv.
Until next time.